Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. Hi, I'm your host, TheWriter. This is the show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So we return once more to the city of Oceanrim, and we have just left behind Fudo Padclaw and the Padclaw tribe, and we move on to a new facet of this ever-expanding story. So join me, won't you, as we return to the city itself and its busy, busy streets. Now, we have a new hero, or character, rather, not so much hero, who will be gracing our presence, named Eldon Shortwick, a halfling rogue, if you will, several levels in. I think he was like 3 or 5 or something like that. Out by himself, trying to make his way in the world. He was a spy in other cities and other neighboring countries, but he wasn't very good at his job and he kept getting caught. So, much like Mattias the Prowler, he changed his name and went on to Oceanrim, where nobody would know his name and he could start fresh. But again, not very good at his job. He was kind of sunken down to a life of thievery to survive, and whether it be a mugging here or a shoplift there, things just weren't going real well for him. But his smaller stature and his quicker hands kept him out of the gallows, out of the hands of the guards, etc., etc., but only just barely. So, if you recall, the lizard folk secured one of the Quicksilver shape-changing staffs, and it was destroyed during Mattias the Prowler's little saga, and then they secured a new one during Fudo Padclaw's storyline, or chapter, if you will. So there are multiple staffs that share the same properties that are all going into the hands of the lizard folk from whatever machinations they've got, whoever the mistresses are, we're not quite sure yet. But we've seen the lizard folk suck the souls out of people, or at least try to, through ritual magic using these magic staffs. And little did Eldon Shortwick know that he might be encountering one of these as well, a third Quicksilver staff, if you will. So, let's start at the beginning, as all good stories do. Eldon Shortwick got not so much caught, but caught off guard by a guard captain, a woman in red spiky armor, who kind of called him in to one of the busier taverns in the city, and she promises him a couple hundred gold pieces if he will go snooping for her. And Eldon, of course, is suspicious of this, is like, she knows who he is, she knows he's got sticky fingers, you know, he's a halfling, he's a rogue, he's got daggers on his hips, he's nothing extraordinary, but certainly something different than the guard normally has at their disposal. So she wants to hire him basically for his burglary skills. And he goes, what do you need from me? Why should I trust you? She pushes some money his way. Okay, I trust you. You'll get the other half of that, Mr. Shortwick, if you will do but a favor for us here at the City Guard. You see, all of the City Guard here at my disposal are elves, men, a couple of half-orcs here and there, but we have no dwarves and we have no halflings, and I believe that someone of your stature and status will be able to help us with a particularly troubling case. And he goes, why should I help the City Guard? You guys are always chasing me anyway. I mean, it's kind of cat's out of the bag at this point. She knows he's a thieving little bastard, but he may as well ask while she's sitting there in front of him trying to negotiate. And she goes, well, do you know the neighborhood known as Children's Row here in Oceanrim? And, of course, he makes the knowledge local check. Children's Row is exactly what it sounds like. It's a street of businesses in the busy, busy city of Oceanrim that cater specifically to children. So, toy stores, clothing stores, candy stores. There's a playground nearby. It's basically like a horseshoe-shaped, like, cul-de-sac, almost. And it's got park benches. They do birthday parties there. It's brightly colored, brightly painted, very clean. But as of late, children have been starting to go missing, as like in the past 6 weeks or so, 5 or 6 children have gone missing, like one after another, and there have been no traces left behind, no blood, no ransom notes, no scraps of cloth, no tracks, no nothing anywhere, to help lead the city guard to whoever is taking them or killing them or stuffing them in boxes and shipping them off for slavery, whatever it happens to be. It is becoming an epidemic. I mean, 1 child per week, that's outrageous. And the city guard has not been able to track down whoever is doing this or why. So she wants him to snoop about, and perhaps his thieving eyes or sticky fingers will find something that they could not, whether because he's smaller or smarter or has keener eyes and senses than the rest of them. I mean, if they're walking around in armor, well, they're the city guard, we better give them a wide berth. But somebody who's not of the city guard could grease a few palms, or go drinking with somebody and get some extra tidbits, or ask the children. I mean, he is a halfling. They might think that he's like them. There is a playground there after all, and perhaps Eldon Shortwick will learn something that the city guard could not, that could lead to the capture and or arrest and or death of whoever is snatching these children. And of course, if this keeps up for much longer, there's only so many families that can stay silent so that they can catch this person and not cause like an epidemic of fear. Because if a bunch of families learn, if Oceanrim learns that children are going missing at Children's Row, the safest place for children in Oceanrim, that's a dozen businesses that will instantly go belly up that have been there for decades. Nobody will ever want to set foot on that street ever again. And, think of their families and their businesses, etc., etc. So a chunk of the business district will just go dead if they don't catch this person. And Eldon goes, okay, so he's got like 150 gold. They promise him another 300 gold if he can find any clues, any tricks or traps, or perhaps an identity for the city guard to chase down, a person of interest, if you will. And Eldon agrees, and he goes, all right, give me like a week. I'll case the place. It's a dozen or so buildings. It's a lot of places to look, a lot of places to snoop about. So Eldon and the city guard captain part ways, and she wishes him good luck, and he kind of pulls his cloak about himself and heads off into the night. He goes and, he gets like smoke sticks and a crowbar and a couple other things that he didn't like have on his person at the time. Eldon was just starting out as a character, so once he learned what his mission was, he was able to go get more tools that he might need for such a thing, for an investigation. And I think he got a spyglass as well. Not a spyglass, a magnifying glass. Gosh. For some reason, I think in Pathfinder, spy glasses are like 1,000 gold, but a magnifying glass isn't nearly as much. So he's going to do some detective work. He got a magnifying glass. So he decides to go in broad daylight the next day and ask about. But not as Eldon Shortwick, but as a child. Now, Eldon decides that he wants to disguise himself as a child, as he is a halfling, and that would be quite easy because he's half everybody else's height. He would appear as a child at a sideways glance, or if he were to put on some makeup, wear a child's outfit, like the little sailor outfit or something like that, he could pass as a small boy. Under the constant question of where are your parents, but it's Children's Row. Kids can run back and forth on their own between like the candy store and the clothing store and the playground, and the parents all sit around on the benches or walk them about or whatever. They pull wagons with their little sisters in them, etc. So they mill about, and Eldon can certainly blend in based on his size. So he dresses up as a child and decides he's going to go ask around the children to see if they know anything, because, if the parents did, they would have already caught this person, but surely they may have heard about a boogeyman or something unusual that, or what does Yoda say? Wonderful it is the mind of a child, or something like that, from one of the Star Wars movies, where they were looking for the planet, but the planet wasn't in the records, and the elderly librarian says if it's not there, it doesn't exist, and then the child says, oh, somebody erased it, and Yoda's like, yes, you're right. So children are more accepting of quote-unquote impossibilities, but there's usually a grain of truth to whatever they're talking about. So if they think there's a monster or a boogeyman or a, something weird going on, they might be more willing to tell Eldon about it, especially if they think he's another child like them. But he decides the children will be a better source of information if anything strange has been going on. And he goes to the center of the cul-de-sac, because that's where the most children are, and he stops at the sandbox. I'm not even kidding. And he asks a couple of kids if anything strange has been going on, and they point him straight to one side of the sandbox, and there is a couple of footprints there, very strange footprints with three-toed claws and a deep heel. And he kind of leans over them like, did you dig this? Did you make this with like your little shovel and pail? No, we were there when we got there this morning. I tried to show my mom, but she wouldn't believe us. And Eldon looks down over these, and he tries to like put his hand out over them, but these feet are much bigger than his hand, something with taloned digits. And he's like, is that goblins? And I go, no, it's too big for goblins. And I go, lizard folk or snake people or something like that. Something, a raptor didn't run through here, but it's kind of the shape. So he kind of gravitates towards lizard folk or Wanti straight away, because it's very reptilian. And he kind of looks at how it's shaped, like a child could not have made this. It wasn't like like they'd drawn this in the sand and tried to convince people that a monster went by. This was shaped correctly, according to his tracking roll, that this was real. So something with taloned feet ran across this sandbox, either in the dead of night or when nobody was looking, and either snatched a child or perhaps had a child and took it somewhere. And he kind of like compasses for a moment, like which way are the feet pointing, and he leans and he looks, and it points towards a children's clothing store. And he heads over that way. It's like there's a candy store, a clothing store, a toy store, another toy store, a couple more clothing stores, etc., etc. A haberdashery for small children. But it looks like a relatively fancy clothing store for small children, like up to your waist, really small. And he kind of peers around for a while, and kind of he checks the alleyway. Nothing unusual. But the shop window has like little sailor outfits and little lord's outfits and little like pianist outfits with tails on them, and cute little top hats and things like that. So it's an upper scale place, but he's suspicious because he kind of follows the sand particles, if you will, and he rolls really high to track across like concrete, across roads, across grass. For a non-ranger is actually really difficult for them. But he follows like the sand particles and sees that whatever left those tracks went into this shop. And just as he's going up to the shop, the street sweeper goes by, and there goes all the evidence. The children's row is very clean and brightly painted and well taken care of because it's a place for children. It's like not quite like Disney World, but they take very good care of it because children should be protected from all the ugly muggings and weird stuff that goes on, and the whorehouses that are out on the bay walk and stuff like that. They make this almost cartoonish place for them to stay and not worry about anything. But the street sweeper goes by just as Eldon arrives in front of this store, and there goes all the evidence of the trail. And no doubt when little Susie goes to play in the sandbox, the footprints will be gone within the hour. So he was very lucky that he arrived when he did. and he peers around the shop window for a while, and all he really sees is an old man behind the counter. So he reaches up, he gets the doorknob, he opens it, he goes in by himself. His parents are not about, but it's not unusual for children to wander around alone in Children's Row. It's got a 30-foot wall around the whole freaking cul-de-sac, so it's not outrageous for children to mill about on their own, much less go into the stores by themselves. If they've got an allowance and they want to go buy a toot sweet, then there you go. And points if you get the reference. Toot sweet, toot sweet. Okay. So he goes in, and again, more mannequins, more. It's a very clean, very widely spaced store. There's a place with a trifold mirror for you to stand and look at yourself up on a little bench or up on a stool, and a place for measurements, all kinds of measuring tapes hanging this way and that. I mean, the guy's a tailor for little kids, and he goes up to the to the counter and he reaches all the way up over his head and kind of rings the bell twice. And the old man leans out over the counter. "Oh, good morning, little master. What can I help you with here today?" And Eldon immediately has to fall into the role. He's already disguised, so he tries to disguise his voice. Is like, "I'm looking for a new suit of clothes." And of course, he's got, allowance, quote unquote, that he puts some money up on the counter to kind of get the guy's attention while he's looking about the shop. And the old man kind of comes out. He's got a cane. He has to kind of lean on it. He's been at this for a while, bending over, serving small children and like sewing and things like that doesn't do well on your back after 40 years. So, and he goes, of course, what is your name?" And he says like Simon or something like that. "Well, tell you what, Simon, let's get you measured up." Or not Simon, that was somebody else. We'll call him Billy. He pretends to be Billy because the old man has a pair of automata that help him out. I forget what they're called. Somebody will tell me in the description. Named Simon and Says. Now, Simon and Says are basically square block robots. I forget what they're called. I based them off the D&D dice-shaped robots. They have wooden bodies with like bronze fittings on them and little spindly arms and little spindly legs, and that one of them is shaped like a D20, one of them shaped like a D10, and they're cute like minion monsters. But I based these guys off the D6 version, so they're cube robots with smiley faces painted on them, and they've got like little bronze arms that barely move and little clampy like lobster claws so they can hold clothing in a certain way and walk around. And they're just simple servants. They follow simple commands, and they look funny because they've got boogly eyes glued on them and stuff like that. So Simon and Says lead him up to a little stool in front of the trifold mirror, and so the guy's like taking his shoulders, measuring, around his neck, down one side of his leg. And he goes, "Oh yes, you're a 6 this way, and you're a 30-something this way," and it measures down the center of his back and stuff like that. And Eldon starts to get wondering, just in a medieval setting, a tailor or a seamstress kind of position for small children is usually a woman. And a very old man doing this by himself. He kind of looks about to see if there's any evidence of a wife or a matron of some description. But no, he's just kind of there by himself. And as Simon and Says are measuring him this way and that, and the old man has his little clipboard there and is writing things down as they chipper and make grinding, squealy bird noises at him about what measurements are what. As he walks by the door, he clicks the lock closed and pulls the shade so that it goes all the way down the front of the shop, revealing the closed sign. And Eldon's like, oh crap, here it is. I walked right into this by myself because my parents, quote unquote, are not here. And right away, the old man stops limping and uses his cane, which is actually a rod, a magic rod, and points it at him and casts the sleep spell on Eldon Shortwick, and he fails his save and immediately just crumples to the ground. And I go, well, shit. This game kind of went sideways on the first dice roll as soon as this combat encounter started. Because Simon and Sez are not especially powerful. They're not especially smart. They're just like wooden automata with bronze fittings in them. And the old man is, a low-level magic user. And I was sure Eldon would, make that, punch Simon, kick Sez, and then go and take on the old man directly. Because once you get into melee with a spellcaster, it's basically over. But then I got to thinking, if I was an old man trying to kidnap children for whatever purpose, what kind of magic spells would I put in my rod or my staff or whatever? I was like, well, hold person? No, they would scream. Sleep. They just fall. You can tie them up and put them in the basement or whatever. And yeah, I know I'm sitting here out of context talking about the old man and his magic rod. Doesn't really do me a lot of good, but oh well. He casts the sleep spell on Eldon Shortwick, and he crumples immediately to the ground. And he snaps his fingers a couple of times, and Simon and Sez, like their faces rotate about until they're like mean cartoon faces, because that's fucking funny to me. They get angry little faces with little triangle teeth on them, even though they're still just wooden automata that move. And they pick up the limp body of Eldon Shortwick, and they drag him down into the basement. Now, obviously, I can't just kill Eldon Shortwick because he failed one save. So after X amount of time, we'll say like the old man checks out between the blinds, he makes sure the sign says closed, he locks the door, he pulls all the shades, and he goes into his like private storeroom, and he pulls out one of those silvery staffs that we've had so much interest in lately. And as he makes his way down into the basement where they've taken Eldon, he slowly morphs into a lizard person, an elderly mage type of lizard person. Snout grows out. He's got the big wide eyes, the scaly skin. He kind of walks out of his old man robes, and he stands there with just like a loincloth and his rod and his staff. And of course, he's got the 3-taloned feet that he snatched somebody playing late at the playground. I don't know exactly how I justified it, but whatever. Maybe he went for a midnight stroll. But his disguise melts away as he needs to perform ritual magic. He needs to be in his natural form. And Eldon kind of wakes up after a little while to find himself laying in a heap in the basement, surrounded by crates, laying in the middle of a magic circle with plenty of candles and sigils. There's crap like drawn on his face. His shirt is missing. There's like symbols and runes up and down him, because this lizard folk guy is going to perform a magic ritual on him by himself. So, the first time around with Mattias the Prowler, there were like 6 or 8 dudes there, like chanting over that woman. This guy is powerful enough to do it by himself, but there are more complicated runes and more candles and more stuff so that he can do it by himself. And he picks up, he throws the rod to one side, and he picks up the silvery staff, the calling staff, if you remember, from the Mages Guild, that could invite the attention of a deity or at least break into its realm. And he starts his chant, and he holds the staff high, and the gem that's in it starts to glitter and glow. And Eldon, of course, wakes up. He kind of throws himself to his feet like, and he goes, Simon says, hold him down. And of course, roll initiative. And Eldon pulls like his short sword from under his disguise. He's like, what child carries a short sword around? And he bashes Says with it, and then Simon and Says like bop him over the head with their little lobster claws a couple of times. Again, they're just low level like mannequin servants that are cube shaped. They can't really hurt him very much, but they do move to protect their master. So the damage does add up over time. And Eldon, gets a throwing knife. He throws it at the wizard guy, misses. And he feels like his health, his HPs or whatever, his fortitude, start to drain away and work themselves into the staff that the lizard folk mage is carrying. And Simon and Says are just in the way. Should this ritual be complete, it won't be good for him. Your soul gets sucked out. It kind of sucks to be you. So he basically kicks Simon and Says in their flat little cartoon faces. He's like, okay, I'm a little outclassed and I'm outnumbered. So Eldon makes for the door, or the staircase. He books it as hard as he can, like double move. But in the meantime, it was like the old man, the lizard folk mage, like, you will not escape, ha! And pitches, I think it was a lightning bolt, like a low-level lightning bolt at his back. And I throw the dice, and it's maximum damage, and Eldon just like blasts, like face first, like bloodies his nose on these stairs and tumbles down them, like yelping like a dog as he goes. And Simon and Says grab him up in like a double grapple, whatever you want to call that, and drag him back to the magic circle. And Eldon fights and he writhes and reels, but they just, their little lobster claw things are like holding him by the wrists, like holding him on the ground, while this ritual reaches its completion and his soul gets sucked out into the silvery staff. And Eldon's like reaching for the light at the top of the basement stairs, but even as he sees his hand stretch out before them, it becomes gaunt and wrinkly and old and then bony, and then it falls to his side as the last life drains from his body. So Eldon got jumped pretty much, and he died there in the center of the ritual circle. And the mage kind of looks to one side. He's a little bit confused that he got so much strong life force from such a small child. And he reaches down and he like pulls off the wig, and he's like, "You are not a child. You are a grown man. You are a halfling. Ha! I got double my energy for the price." And of course, Eldon's already dead. He looks like a mummy. His eyes are gone, and his mouth is gaunt and pressed. All of his skin is pressed back and browned. He's like, fair enough then. And he's like, my staff is finally charged all the way. All those children, ha! I guess the final bit of energy I need just walked in, disguised as a child. How strange that you would come here for clothes pretending to be a small boy. Well, serves you right. Ha 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 ha. And he just like whacks Eldon over the face, and Eldon's skull collapses from being dried out like a mummy, and he is extra dead. So the mage, the lizard folk mage, turns and he's like, "Ha!" and he points it at the wall, and the wall rips open, like the fabric of reality comes undone, and water just starts pouring in. It puts all the candles out. It smudges the magic circle. Eldon Shortwick's remains get muddied up and just kind of disintegrate. Like there's nothing that's going to bring him back at this point. Simon and Says climb up on some crates so they don't get rusty and wet. And the mage looks and he can see Relaya beyond the rip in time and space. And he like slams the butt of the staff on the ground again, and the tear obeys and it closes up again. But there's still seawater all over the floor, and he picks it up and he kind of pours it out. And he's like, yes, it finally works. Just as planned. My mistresses will be elated with this victory. And he goes over to one of the crates and he gets some fabric out and he wraps up the staff like extra thick, like it's supposed to look like a bolt of cloth or something. Wraps it up extra thick. He hands it over to Simon and says, and he goes and he gets his robes, like some dry robes, and he puts them on and he reactivates his magical disguise so he looks like an elderly gentleman again. He's like, Simon says we are leaving for good. And Simon and Says like stack, they're just cubes. Again, they stack themselves on top of each other to make like one automata that's got 4 arms and 2 faces, and it's hilarious because I think it is. And they follow behind him like a manservant. They've got like a traveling backpack in one hand and like a cudgel in the other hand in case anybody should mess with their master. And carrying the hidden magical staff and his servants in tow, the lizard folk mage skips town out of Oceanrim, never to be seen again. And the guard captain never found out what happened to poor Eldon Shortwick. And, children stopped disappearing, but not for any good reason. So that case kind of solved itself, but at a heavy price. So, we have learned the lizard folk are sucking the souls or life energy out of people via these staffs to power them, like mana batteries, and they can rip open holes in reality to the elemental plane of water to Relaya, the sunken city where Cthulhu sleeps. And, one of those staffs got busted, another one got handed off to the lizard folk, and, this third one has been fully charged and is ready to, open the portal or open, rips wherever the lizard folk want to, directly to Relaya, where all those nasty fish people live, where Cthulhu sleeps, and where God knows what the lizard folk and their mysterious mistresses have planned in their horrible machinations that will be revealed in the future. So, I'm afraid that was the tale, the short of Eldon Shortwick the Short. He only lived for one game, the poor guy, and some people balk when you kill a character, especially so quickly, but as a DM, I'm just like a dice fall where they may. If I roll maximum damage, you're going to take maximum damage. Otherwise, what's the point of having hit points, And I'm not trying to justify myself. I'm just saying I know it can be frustrating, especially we were playing Pathfinder. And I know creating a character in Pathfinder takes 2 hours. So I know he was mad. The guy playing the characters. He probably spent 2 or 3 hours making Eldon Shortwick, and he probably lived for 3 hours of gameplay. So it was not fun that, it was the random lightning bolt or the random crossbow bolt that tags your character in the back. You just happen to take full damage and die. It can suck, but it makes for a good story. So Eldon Shortwick was a bit of a hiccup in the story, and the lizard folks' plans moved forward a lot more quickly than I thought they would, so the direction of the campaign started to shift a little wildly because I had to rework a lot of things that were going to happen to a much sooner point in the timeline, because they have not one but 2 of these reality-ripping staffs now, and there's only going to be more out there. So they are gathering these staffs to make rips to do something, but perhaps we will talk more about that next time on D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!